Hi, what is your name?
My name is Chuck Connor.
Hi, this is Jana Luther Connor.
What years did you attend Texas Tech?
I was at Tech from 1988 to 1991.
I attended Texas Tech starting in the fall of 1988, and I graduated in the spring of 1994.
What was the campus atmosphere like at Texas Tech when you attended?
When I first arrived, I had gone there sight unseen. Didn't have any friends going to Tech, and as I drove in on 19th Street, there was a tumbleweed. So this Iowa girl got to see her tumbleweeds for the very first time. Loved the vibe. It was a beautiful campus, like from the get-go. Just easily made friendships, and I just really loved the whole atmosphere.
During the time I was at Texas Tech, the campus was not nearly as new and had a lot of older buildings on campus. There weren't a lot of dorms back then. Most of the dorms that are there now were definitely older. For instance, the dorm that I lived in, Bledsoe Hall, at the time did not have any air conditioning, which is interesting to think about now. We didn't notice much, but we had ceiling fans, so it wasn't too bad. Another thing that I was thinking about was it didn't seem like the landscaping was nearly as well done back then as it is now. It seems like there's more flowers planted on a frequent basis, and the grass seems to be a lot greener today, which is kind of funny to me. There were a lot of worn out paths in the grass. Memorial Circle wasn't in its current configuration. It was more just a flat circle that people walked across all over the place. The fountains definitely weren't there. There was just flags in the middle, and it was mainly grass. There were a lot of people doing things outside on campus, for sure. One thing about the campus that the first time I came back after I had been gone for a while is that we had no cell phones when I was there. By the time I left, no one really had cell phones. So that, coupled with the fact that there was no internet by the time I'd left, at least widespread, a lot more people were outside doing things.
Can you share any memorable experiences at Texas Tech?
Some of the memories are is Carol of Lights, the football games that we did, a ton of Tech events, everything and anything was always available to us. I do remember the long walk, though. I had a lot of classes across the campus at the art building, the architecture building, and I lived in Gordon. So I would pop in Rick Astley, who was a big artist at the time, on my Walkman and walk across campus at a brisk pace. I think it took 14 to 15 minutes.
While I was at Tech, I remember going to a lot of concerts at Lubbock Memorial Coliseum. There were all kinds of concerts on campus too, at Allen Theater. I saw a couple of really good shows there. Of course, going to football games, that was always memorable for me because I love football. Homecoming seemed to be a bigger deal as well. Everyone went to the bonfire the night before the homecoming game. Carol of Lights was also a big memory for me. It was really nice to see the campus all lit up for Christmas, which was a unique experience for sure.
What were the popular hangout spots for students back then?
Popular hangouts at Tech included one guy from Italy across the street from the dorms, Bash Rip Rocks, or Bashes as we called it. There was a restaurant called Mesquite's that was down an alley across the street from Tech. Later on, after we went off campus, we would hang out at the Texas Cafe, or the Spoon as we called it. Nightclubs included The Planet, which was kind of the place where everyone wore black. It was sort of an avant-garde like club that was a little more club music types of things. There was also one out 19th Street that was called Dallas Nights. That was definitely the most popular meat market type club at Tech. The Cowboys all went to a club called Midnight Rodeo. Went there a couple of times, definitely an interesting experience. Of course, there were all kinds of house parties and fraternity parties to go to.
At the time, popular hangouts was Bash Rip Rocks, J-Pats, and Spankies. Spankies being my personal favorite, and it's fun to go back there now, and it's so much bigger, 2 stories. It was just a really dinky little place when I was there, but I loved it.
What significant events or changes took place at Texas Tech during your time here?
The one thing I remember the most was the tortilla tossing started when I was there. One of the games, whoever decides to do concessions at a football game decided to put lids on the pop. And so what happened was we hadn't had those lids before, so everybody just lost their minds in the student section and they started throwing those lids everywhere. So guess what? The very next week when we had another game, they obviously didn't have the lids anymore for the pop, but people started bringing in some tortillas, which I thought was hilarious. I don't know where they got the idea, but that's where it all started.
Memorable event that occurred in the first year or two that I was at Tech was we had a huge measles outbreak, and we had to get measles booster shots. ... Of course, as with a lot of events at Tech, we had to have a Measles Mania t-shirt made. So we had those, wearing those. That was pretty fun. Also, other major events that happened at Tech while I was there, there was an odd racial incident that occurred at a frat party on campus. It made the news there in town. I think it was like some guys dressed up as Klansmen. Pretty crazy. A lot of upset people for sure. I think we ended up having some sort of unity ceremony at Memorial Circle with speakers and things like that. So that was kind of interesting. I remember a lot of people being up in arms. It was an interesting time. Not a lot of African American kids at Tech then. We only have 25,000 total at the time enrolled. So it was a lot smaller. So the other thing, in '93, the women's basketball team won the national championship, which was a really huge deal. And they had a huge parade and a big celebration after they won the championship at Jones Stadium. Cheryl Swoops was on that team. It was very interesting.
How was the sports culture?
Sports culture, Spike Dykes was the football coach. Everything was football back then. It was more of a rebuilding year. I know he started in '86, but we loved it. So it was great going to the football games. Hit a couple of baseball games and basketball, but I think my favorite was football. I had a great time at Tech.
Sports, what it was like at Tech then. Basically, obviously still like it is today, football was the big sport. But it was not nearly as big a deal as it is now. The whole time I was there, our coach was Spike Dykes, which was a lovable West Texas type guy that basically the only games that really sold out were when we played Texas or Texas A&M, huge rivals for us. Beating those two teams were significant in that time period for us. But as far as students go, we could go to the student entrance 5 minutes before the game and just walk in and go right into the student section without a wait. And I remember my buddies and I were pretty hardcore, and we get there like 30 minutes before and sit down in the front row, and there would still be space behind us during the game. So it definitely wasn't nearly as big a deal. On another note, I remember when tortillas started. When we were there, probably '93 or so, they had the big plastic Texas Tech cups. They had lids on the cups for one of the games, and the kids were throwing the lids like crazy. Needless to say, that was the only time they did that. Not long after that, kids started throwing tortillas because they got the idea, I think, from the lids from the cups. Basketball wasn't nearly as big a deal then. We weren't nearly as competitive as we are now. Like I said, the women's team won a national championship in '93. So up to that point, the coach, Marcia Sharp, was the legend on campus. She commanded a lot of power in the athletic department, and I think for a long time she was the women's athletic director when they had separate ones. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think the women's team outdrew the men's team on a regular basis, and they had a much more dedicated fan base back then. The rest of the sports were pretty under the radar. I went to baseball games. Track and field was pretty much not at any student's consciousness back then, before we were really good at track and field. But overall, football was still the sport. We were definitely a lot more low-key than we are now. And basketball, had its games that were good, but it was never anything like it is now.